Welcome guys, welcome back. In the previous video, we discussed about the risk assessment. Now it's time to look at the next step of risk management, which is risk mitigation. What is risk mitigation? Risk mitigation means reduce the risk using controls. So let's think about an example. The current example that we are going to think about is you keep your confidential information in your server and it's connected to internet, so anybody can access to the information in the server. So in that case, it's very high risk because not only your employees or your customers can access the information, but also somebody would like to steal the data, or maybe hackers will be able to access your data, which is risky, for example. So risk is 100% because there is no control whatsoever. Now, how can we reduce the risk? We won't reduce the risk to 80%. To do that, we have to come up with some controls, right? Okay. Now, can you guys think about a control? Yeah, I would like to have a control having a just authentication, just username and password, so that at least that controlled access to the server. Okay, 80%. And I would like to reduce further. Is it possible to reduce further? That means we have to come up with more controls to reduce the risk, right? Now we decided to add a firewall. So adding a firewall would reduce the risk, say for example, up to 60%. Still not happy. So we would like to reduce further. So now I want to reduce the risk to 50%. To do so, we have to add more controls. Now what we are going to now is to encrypt the data, what we are going to keep in the server, so that only who can do the decoding the data would be able to find the information in the server. So still 50%, but I want to reduce further to 40%. So we need to have more controls. To do so, then we are going to add the biometric devices as an additional way of authentication. So now it's 40%, right? Okay. Now another question is, we come up with all the controls in the world, and then can we decide in one point of time that our risk is 0%? That means we eliminate the risk. Is it possible? I don't think so. So that means that's not possible to eliminate the risk. That's very important. Remember that we can reduce the risk using controls. But now you can see that, okay, we started from 100% total exposure, and then 80, 60, 50 and 40. Now the next question is this: which level are we going to stop, and who make that decision? Is it you as an IT people or someone else? Answer is, to which level? Who decided? Answer is, that decision is made by the senior management, because if something goes wrong within your organization, they have to have ultimate responsibility. They have to bear the ultimate responsibility. So the decision is made to stop with the 60, 40 or 50 by the senior management. Why? They stop somewhere because, as you can see, that more and more controls means cost is higher and higher. So they would try to balance between cost and the benefits and the cost and the risk, and then they would balance between these two and decide to stop. In this case, for example, 60%, we put only username and password and the firewall, and they think that's all right. But now still there is a 60% of risk, right? Correct? Now management is not happy, because if something goes wrong, it's going to be ultimate of my responsibility, right? So do they have any other choices? Yes. The next choice they have is to transfer the remaining risk to third party. For example, buying insurance. Okay. Now the question is you ask is this. Okay. We reduce up to 60% and then transfer to the third party. Why can't we just transfer it without doing any controls whatsoever? But the problem here is this: if you do it without any controls, then the insurance agent would come and do their own risk assessment to your organization, and then their insurance premium that you have to pay would be extremely high. So organizations always reduce the risk using controls to a level they feel comfortable. In other words, to a level that management feel most comfortable. And then if they're still worrying about the remaining risk, then we buy the insurance and transfer it to the third party. Okay, now we reduce the risk using controls. We transfer the remaining risk to third party. Do you have any other options? Yes. The last option I would say is to avoid the risk. What is avoid the risk? Let me explain with an example. We are a bank and we would like to go for e-banking, and it seems that e-banking is high risk to your organization. You're very worrying about the data loss, maybe hacking to your customers' information. So you decided, okay, we'll continue with our traditional banking, but no e-banking whatsoever. So that is avoid the risk. Okay, what is the difference between eliminate the risk and avoid the risk? Eliminate the risk means we still go for e-banking and we come up with many controls and decide, okay, we don't have risk at all. That's eliminating. But avoid the risk means no, we don't do e-banking, but we do traditional banking only. And at the same time, I tell you guys, this is the last option, right? Why is it the last option? What do you think? Because if you don't do e-banking, there are some customers within your organization, where you have some customers who would like to have services from your bank, but they like e-banking. So since you don't provide that service to those customers, they would like to go to other banks. As a result of that, you might lose some customers, right? Okay. So summary of risk mitigation. Reduce using controls to a level acceptable to the management. Transfer the risk to a third party. And avoid the risk, remember, cannot eliminate the risk. The last step of risk management is called risk reevaluation. Risk reevaluation means we go back to risk assessment and risk mitigation. We do first step, now we go back to step number 1 and then do the step number 2 again. So when are we doing risk reevaluation? Then that's a question that I should ask you guys. Okay, there are 2 different scenarios that we do risk evaluation that we call time-driven and event-driven. Time-driven means we do periodically. That means once every 6 months time, we do the risk assessment and risk mitigation, or once in every year. That's called time-driven. Okay, so there's no external factor whatsoever. We just do it. The second one we call event-driven. Event-driven means whenever there is an environment change. Let me give you guys some example of environment change. So you guys do traditional banking. Now we do go for e-banking. That's the environment change within the organization. Now our total risk structure is going to be different totally. So now it's time for us to do the risk assessment again because they have a new risk comes in. So we had to come up with controls to reduce the risk for the e-banking. So that's something happened to your organization. Or else there's a new government regulation comes in. So your organization not comply with that. That's an environment change to your organization. Or maybe natural disaster happens. That's going to be environment change. So I ask a question from you guys. The environment change, is it something happened to your organization? Is it some change happened to your organization? Is that the only reason we do risk assessment again or do the risk reevaluation again? Right. If something happened to similar organization, we might still go and do the risk assessment and risk mitigation. That means risk evaluation. For example, can you guys remember like about 7-8 years ago, there was an earthquake happened in Japan. As a result of that, there was a nuclear plant meltdown. So that means a big risk to the nuclear plants. As soon as that incident happens, all the nuclear plants in the world, they go back and did their risk assessment and risk mitigation to see whether that if similar things happen to their organization, how can they handle it? Will there be disaster to their organizations? That's something that they do. That means risk reevaluation. In other words, environment change, not necessarily something changed to organization. It could be something happened to similar organization, and then we look back ourselves and see, are we ready for that? So finally, this we look at summary. So we do the risk assessment, risk mitigation, and then risk reevaluation. Risk reevaluation means go back to step number 1, risk assessment and risk mitigation. Good to have you guys.